Welcome everyone. Um, Today I decided to kind of take a couple of hints that people had suggested last week. One was a wildlife, and the other was to try and create a better composition out of something. So I'm going overboard today. I'm taking 3 different photographs that I happened to have shot years ago while I was in the Grand Teton National Park, and I'm combining them together to create a different composition and create with color a little bit of a different mood. I got something sketched up on this 18 by 24 canvas, and I got to move on this thing because there's kind of quite a bit of stuff going on. So let's just get started here. First thing I'm going to do is lay a sky in. I will state my palette before I begin because usually everybody asks. I have a titanium white, a Naples yellow light, a cad lemon hue, a yellow ochre, a little bit of a cad orange, a little bit of a cad red light. Not sure if I'm going to use how much of those, but I put them in there anyway. Alizarin crimson, ultramarine blue, sap green, and then I threw a different green in that I just pulled. I was going through my paints and realized I had a chromium green oxide, so I threw that on there. Color that I often use, and I haven't used for quite a while because I haven't found my tubes of it, and that's Mars Violet. Asphaltum and raw sienna. So first thing I'm going to do is lay a sky in. You can see I've got 3 different. I'm going to combine kind of the 2 of these. I like this openness here. This is a little too dense, but I like the bleached out area right in here. So what I'm trying to do is recompose. I took my mousse, and I did a little study last night on a piece of vellum. The mousse was a little too centered, and I want to crop the trees. I don't want that much sky. And I made the sky a little too yellow. So we're going to change a few things. I moved the mousse, you can see. So we're going to start with the sky, and I'm going to start with Naples yellow and white, much the same as I have there, but I want it whiter. I don't want as much of a strong yellow into it. I'm going to start more in this range. And I'm just going to kind of blot some sky in. And I'm kind of using both photos. I'm using some of the trees from both. So I'm really not using just one or the other. There's an openness here I like between the trees. Now, I'm laying this in not real thin and not real thick. I normally would go back and get the sky a lot thicker. And if I have time, I'll do it. If not, I may do it a little off camera. So getting that in, we're going to get some light between the trees. So I'd like to have everything laid in about the first 20 minutes. I don't know if I can do it, but that's my goal. Because I want refinement time. And a lot of times it's one of the things that you have to let go when you do these quickies. But it'd be really nice if I could get a little bit of refinement into this thing. You probably like it too. So I'm going to take the sky as it moves over to this area in here. I'm going to go whiter, and I'm going to throw some actual cad lemon into it. You can see it goes a little bit lighter. Probably even going to go lighter still. But for right now, that's where we're going to lay it in. That's why I'm using this brush, because I know I can get it in there quickly. A lot of little trees in here. I want to get all those in. I'm going to paint them in as positives, probably, meaning the tree trunks themselves. But for right now, I just kind of want to get some sky in there.
So you're working from the image on the right because...
Image on the right, I like this area right here. Image on the left, I like kind of some of the trees in there, and I like the density in here. So that's why I've used the 2 of them together. We start on the trees on the left. Like I said, I want to get this laid in as quick as I can. two color mixtures are really easy. I can mix those up again. It's very neutral. I'm going to start with a chromium green oxide, and I'm going to lay the Mars Violet into it, so it comes up with kind of a weird warm olive. I actually throw a little yellow, a little raw sienna into that. It's darker than I want, I'll tell you right now. And I'm going to throw a little bit more Mars Violet, a little bit more raw sienna. And I'm going to try and come up with as much of the character of these trees as I can as a lay-in. I would definitely go back into it later and rework it and add more interest and character to the trees. But for a quick, a little bit more red in it. Very warm. I've changed the mood quite a bit. And I'm kind of working off this and this simultaneously. Just looking at tree edges is really what I'm looking at. Masses and edges.
Kind of nice to see people are posting where they're watching from. So we have
good.
Alaska and San Antonio, Texas, and let's see what am I missing here.
It's nice to see.
Southern Cal, Santa Clarita.
I don't mind if it mixes in with the paint underneath either. I don't want this to necessarily be flat and clean. One of the things that will help is if I establish where those tree trunks are. That'll give me at least something to work off of. So I'm looking for one of my small brushes. And we'll just start in right about here and here. Branch or two here. Some density of tree trunks right in here. We'll just get a feel for what I'm looking right here, just in case you're wondering, because I'm bouncing back and forth my view. This working from multiple references. There are people nowadays that are super gifted with the internet, and I've watched people put together with Photoshop multiple images, and I'm old school, so us old illustrators would kind of figure it out on our own. I don't know if you guys are noticing, but every time I put the brush down, I'm doing a couple things. I'm using a different part of the brush, and I'm using a different type of stroke. Sometimes you'll just see me push it down. Sometimes you'll see me stroke it. Sometimes you'll see me push it back the other way. That's because foliage, trees, whatever you want to refer to it as, is not very mechanical. It has a very organic, free-flowing feel. So in order to get that free flow, okay. It's not as neat as I'd like it to be, but it's about as much as I'm going to get this. I want to lose some of these now. I'll find those tree trunks again. As we move over to the right, one of the things, actually, as I'm doing this, I'm going to take a little let's just start to lay this in. And I just threw a little bit more asphaltum into it. But I don't want it to be a flat color. So there's your chromium green oxide, asphaltum. I could have just been using sap green too. It's just a time saver when you add these additional colors. I could do the whole thing with 3 colors, but it's a time saver because you don't have to mix it up. So we're just going to get a nice big tone in here as quick as we can. Give me something to work off of. I see a lot of warm in there, then I can get a lot more in there, but for right now, that mixture is actually pretty good. Okay, I also see and I'm looking at the photo on the left, I happen to notice there's a greenery kind of back behind, but I'm going to make it more of a orangery. I'm going to make it more like that. And basically I've just, with Naples yellow and yellow ochre, it's not sticking very well, so I need to wet the paint. There we go. I'll just put a little, it's another layer of trees kind of back there being hit by light. And we'll bring it all the way over in here. Okay. Now let's get those other tree trunks in, kind of where I think there's not going to be as many trees. And one is going to go right here. That's a main one. And there's a couple branches going off of it. And there's another one right about in here. It's pretty dense in here. And then I'm going to hit one right here. I'll tell you why I want some of this over in here breaking like this is because I want to do some reflections down at the bottom.
Hard to even see in that photo reference.
Yeah, you have to learn to look for things. And that's true if you're painting on location or if you're painting from reference. I think it's easier to see things sometimes if you're painting on location. And sometimes a lot more difficult because the camera hides things. So you learn a lot by doing a lot of location stuff.
So Kevin Trivedi said he really likes how you're utilizing atmospheric perspective on the trees in the background.
Oh yeah, it's exactly what I'm doing. I don't want them to be too dark. I want them to be dark, but I want them to be too dark. And I want these to get lighter because right in here we're going to bleach it out. That's not even going to look like tree color by the time I get into that, which is probably close to now. So first thing I'm going to do is paint. Let's see what color I'm going to mix up here. A little bit of green, but not too much. Maybe a little more. Let's try this.
So you just mix that into...
I mixed it, or I actually mixed a whole new color. I used raw sienna and the green.
Anthony Villanueva Torres says, "Hi Craig, here to feel like I'm still in your class." Haha.
I don't know if that's good or bad.
And Diana said, "The speed at which you're painting is unbelievable. But you're just doing that because of..."
I'm doing it because it's time. I've said this very, when I teach, I say it to a lot of students, simply because I don't want everybody to think this is how fast you paint. This is for demonstration purposes. And the reason I know how to do this is I've done a lot of demonstrations over the years in terms of teaching, plus painted a lot of plein air. Plein air is the other reason that you learn this. working quickly because of the time frame that you're given with plein air. You know, it's like the sun, something like this, the sun's going down behind, so it's a little different. Sun's going down over in here. It's probably down, it's probably right up about behind these trees, so. And then through trial and error, you kind of begin to get a feel for color schemes. I also think another great way to look at learning color schemes is look at great art. Look at the masters. Look at great contemporary people. You know, everyone's got their little, what it comes down to, nobody likes to admit this, but it comes down to formulas. You know, people say, well, I'm not a formula painter. Every artist has their own little formulas that they use for certain things. Every artist. That doesn't mean you don't experiment. It doesn't mean you don't try other things. I certainly do. It just means that, in general, you become either comfortable with the way to use a brush, the wetness of the paint, how thick or thin you start, colors that you know work for certain things, and you simply learn that through mileage, doing a lot of paintings. It's like, I think I said last week, someone said to me, the way to learn to paint better is to paint. Sometimes I'll lay the whole brush down like that, just to get a different kind of an edge, and sometimes I'll stroke it a little bit, sometimes I'll just lift. Okay, that's starting to look okay. I want the things are falling, you can probably hear. That's pretty typical.
Oh my God, all day.
The faster I paint, the more things start flying. So I'm going to lighten that color up a little bit as we move to this right in here. And I know I'm going to have to come in with some sky holes, which is fine.
You're just working on the basic.
Yeah, I want to get these basic tones in so that I do have refinement time. I'm already falling behind where my goal was, so. But that's okay. It just means I have less time to refine. That means my first stroke's got to be that much better. Don't like that dark. I had some dark in the brush and it kind of came out. Just kind of intermixing those colors. I want the same color now over here because I want to get brighter in there. So I want a similar color right about in here. So we'll do this next. Throw a little bit more asphaltum into it, just right there. It just was feeling too light. That's all. Okay. Mess it up.
What was that mixture again?
Asphaltum. It's a combination of several things. It's very ochre oriented. So if I were to say what color is it closest to, it's closest to like an ochre right now. But it's a little green. It's got a little raw sienna in it. It's got a little white, some other colors. And I think what that does is it keeps it from looking too static, like you've just painted with, like you might do a silk screen where you're oversimplifying. And you simplify one color for this. In this case, because we're painting and we're not doing something like a silk screen or a print, we can get much more interesting variations going on. Okay, now I'm going to go to that center part, and I'm really going to brighten that color up quite a bit. Let's see how that works. Yeah, it's pretty good.
So Rebecca has an interesting question. If you had limited funds, would you take workshops, go to a convention, or neither, with the goal of improving your painting?
Workshops. Just because,
Specific.
yeah, you get more one-on-one. You get more one-on-one with a workshop. And your conventions are great if you've painted a lot, I think, and you're really ready for more verbal and more visual kind of demonstration stuff, kind of like I'm doing here, where with a workshop you get to work and get input from whoever's conducting the workshop. I think in that regard, for learning, probably workshops, I would say. If you want information, conventions. Keep in mind, that's just my opinion. Okay? Okay, leave it like that. I can lighten that up a little bit. I'm going to take that same kind of color now and just, because I want the feeling of that light kind of working its way down in here. And I actually did it in my study. I was just kind of going off the top of my head. So now I actually have something to say, well, this works pretty good and this doesn't. It's one of the nice things about doing a little study when you're just, particularly when you're doing something like this, when you're combining. The only thing I noticed in my study that I didn't like is I had the moose centered. And I kind of wanted him off center because I want this area here to be a little bit more powerful. And I'm going to take that right now a little bit lighter, believe it or not. Yeah, a little thicker paint too. Look at that. Let's just get it. There we go.
So AJ Albert has a good question.
Sure.
Took Intro to Illustration with you at Art Center. It was all acrylics.
Right.
I only paint in oils now and instruct followers to start with oils. How do you feel about acrylics versus oils as a place to start to learn to paint?
Acrylics are easier, first of all.
According to you.
Acrylics, okay. Point blank, acrylics are easier. Very simply because you're less apt to get dirty, muddy color. It doesn't mean to start with it. I'm not saying to start with acrylics. When I was in school, I learned in gouache. That was my first medium. I don't use gouache too much anymore because when I started illustrating, acrylics were the rage, and I really got into acrylics. And I taught in acrylics then because that was the medium that was more popular. And a lot of that had to do with drying time. Acrylics is still the best medium because of drying time for commercial work. But I don't necessarily think one is better than the other. As far as teaching, I teach both. And in fact, when people take workshops of mine, some of them use watercolor. I like all mediums. I don't, people say, what's your preference? I work in oils very simply because I think it's the most difficult to become really proficient at. There's so much more going on. I think watercolor is probably the second. I think acrylic is the easiest. Gouache is closer to acrylic, but acrylic, honest to God, you could sneeze on it, you could step on it, you could drive a car over it, and it's there. The other mediums, a little bit different. Oils is the easiest medium to get your colors muddy with. So I don't have a preference. I teach in both. I teach in pastels. People want to work. Had a woman in a workshop a few years ago, and I hadn't touched pastels in years. I felt like really rusty, but I had more fun sitting down and doing a pastel demo for her. And I don't necessarily, there's so many great pastel artists, I'm not even trying to pass myself off as one. I like all mediums. I really do. Watercolor's a kick. I don't use it too much. I'll tell you another one. Water-soluble oils. I use them whenever, usually we go to, I don't know why I do it here, in Mexico. Whenever I take a trip to Mexico, I bring water-soluble oils. And pretty much have found they work really well. I mean, people say, how do you like them? I like them. I think you have to, it's a little bit of a learning curve, but not that much. I think the medium that was hardest for me to master, boy am I pushing it with saying master, was gouache. It's because I was in school and I was just learning how to paint. And it was a rough medium to really learn. But boy, once you learn it, you can switch over to most of the other mediums. And you can switch back to gouache anytime.
What are you mixing up now?
I'm mixing kind of a green color, kind of a golden green. I had it more gold in there, but I think I want a little bit more green. I mixed, and it's this brush back in here. Here it's real green, here it's real gold, and I'm kind of going between the two. This is all in shadow, by the way. And you always want to vary the colors. So sometimes I'll pick up a little extra green, which I just did, and I went a little too far with it. And now I'll bring back some orange to temper that green. Bring it back that direction. And maybe a little bit more green. And we're doing these layers of foliage. And I'm trying to be kind of true. Sometimes I'm looking up here and sometimes I'm looking over here. But I'm setting things back behind this mousse.
Anthony was saying, I remember hating acrylic until Craig showed me how to use it like watercolor and gouache in his narrative illustration class.
Yep.
Now I pretty much use it over watercolor due to drying time and flexibility.
Flexibility.
People are still surprised to know that my watercolor paintings are actually acrylic.
Oh yeah. You can make acrylic look just like watercolor. You can make acrylic look just like oil. And I've done acrylics and people will look at them and say, well, that's gouache. I'm like, no, it's acrylic. And then I've heard, I actually had a couple instructors working in our department that said, well, I can't get good color with acrylics. I says, you can get actually stronger color. And basically just tried to show them how. And it's a matter, I'm mixing a little green over that just because I was feeling a little too much like one color, by the way. But with acrylics, because it dries so darn fast, you can glaze a color over it and get a very intense color, very intense, as much as you want. You can take something like gesso and go back and whiten an area. Okay, I think we got starting to feel kind of correct. You're painting for the feeling of what I see, not the exactness. Obviously not the exactness, because you can't find anything that is just like this, but you're using the concept of landscape and the concept of kind of growth and indication. I know I've used that word a lot, and I'll continue to use it anytime I do a demo. Indication. Very important word to keep in mind, because that's what you're doing when you're painting. You're indicating. Okay. Now let's take it down a little bit into the what we would call the water. And I want to get that laid in pretty quick. I was hoping to have it all laid in by now. Notice I'm saving the mousse. There's interesting warms, mixtures of warms in there. In this case, I just threw a little Mars Violet into it. People ask me about that color all the time. I discovered it years ago. It's great for portraits, for if you're painting like creases or wrinkles in people. With it, you will not get too dark with it, which is really kind of nice. And it's kind of a muted warm. When you squeeze it out of the tube, it looks very much like a burnt sienna. But if you tint it with a little white, it goes much more violet.
Errol wants to know about thoughts on using acrylic for underpainting than oils on top.
Yep. I know other artists that do that quite often. It's because you can set it up really quick. I got about, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, I was doing a commission for a gentleman, and he needed them by Thanksgiving. I got the first one done, and they were large. One was about 6 foot by something, vineyard workers. So it was, not simple subject matter. And I just wanted to do that for fun. And I like I said, I was behind. And so I literally, on the second one, I laid the whole thing in acrylics and then went back and finished it in oil because I could work. That's the other thing. I can work so much faster with acrylics than I can with oil. I'm just looking for these trees as to where they go. Make sure I kind of get them in the... It doesn't matter if they're the exact same spot, just similar. And that gets kind of dense and almost doesn't matter.
How thin is the paint in your laying?
Right now it's thin. Up in here, it's this pretty thick. Mm-hmm. This is thin because I needed to get it in fast. That's the reason. Okay, right here, we want to go right down here, right down here. And I don't want a flat color. Much the same as when I was painting in here. I don't want a flat color.
Keeping the values.
Yep. I think I mentioned that last week that I read it somewhere. Somebody posted it, and I thought it was great. That it's a quote, not my quote, but I'll use it anyway. That value does the work, color gets the credit.
Mm-hmm. It's a great quote.
It really is. It's incredibly true.
Linda Monahan wants to know, what do you use to clean your brushes when you've used water mixable oil?
Water.
Just soap and water.
Water, in water-soluble oils, water is like turp.
But you would use different brushes, not your regular oil brushes.
Yeah, I use my regular oil brushes. I have so many that I do use them. Okay, I gotta get going on this mousse. Let's get his shadow in there first. I just threw some asphaltum into this mixture I already had. It's a little too dark. I didn't want it to go that dark that fast. But I ended up there.
Do you remember what brand the water soluble? Someone asked us that a couple
Winton.
weeks ago.
I've used different kinds. I've used, I just mix them. And truthfully, I've never bought any. People have given them to me, vendors basically, because they want me to try them and they want me to rave about their products. And all of them that people have, Cobra was pretty good too. I mean, all of them that people have let me use, I haven't found one that I thought was bad.
These are the
You looking for them?
Yeah. Winsor Newton Artisan.
Artisan. There you go. The answer is Artisan.
Well, Winsor Newton Artisan.
Yeah.
Ah.
I think that's what I used. And I think Anna used some recently. Didn't you use them in Cuba?
No.
I thought you did. So we're going to paint the dark shape of this moose in the shadow, and I'm painting it pretty dark. That's so you can see it's making this sit back. Like as soon as we pop that dark in.
Let's see, I missed a question. Samantha wants to know, what medium did you use for your little study?
Oil. But you know what? Really cool. I'm glad you asked that question.
What did you paint on and why?
Yeah. I painted on vellum. Vellum is kind of plastic. It's a lot of plastic, and oil doesn't stain it. It slides on it real. Now, the why is because I couldn't find a panel, a nice small panel that I kind of wanted to do a study on. So I grabbed this pad of vellum, remembering that about 20 years ago in class, I had students work on vellum, and I liked it. I really liked it. I wouldn't mind doing some more little things on it. It's really kind of nice. Wonderful old illustrator, and who eventually turned it out to be a phenomenal painter. Unfortunately passed away way too young. Bob Heindel used to paint on vellum. And I remember him telling me that he thought it was just a great medium because he liked to slide paint around a lot. I'd rather paint the dark over where the lights would be and force the lights to overlap back over it, which is kind of what I'm doing here. I think I need a smaller brush for this. I went down to my little number 8 rosemary here. Was it someone in this group that asked me how come I call my brushes rosemary?
Yeah, a couple weeks ago.
That was funny. That's the brand of the brush, just so you know. They're great little brushes. They're just wonderful brushes. Someone actually wrote me last week and asked me which rosemary. I like them all. This happens to be an ivory, which is the one I use. The bristles I use tend to be ivories. I bought a couple others. I bought some synthetics that I thought were kind of nice. I really haven't run into any of their brushes I didn't like. When I do portraits, I use a mongoose, which is a softer brush. So in this case, what's important is the silhouette. So I almost got the silhouette there. There's definitely adjustments I could do. So I'm going to take, I'm going to paint a little bit back here and a little bit here where I messed up. The legs are a little bit thicker, I can see right here. This leg is a little bit more that way. But now comes the wonderful reddish, beautiful tone. And I'm using a lot of raw sienna. Let's see what raw sienna does. It's pretty good. I got into painting moose several years ago. I used to enter this show called the Arts for Parks every year. It was a great show. Unfortunately, it's no longer, but it was a wonderful show. Met a lot of great artists at it. First time I went back, I got a piece in. We went back for the top 100, which fortunately I got into. And I had never been in Wyoming or any of that area before, and we were out, and I saw moose for the first time, and I was just fascinated. A couple of things. Number one, the size, just the sheer size. They're just majestic. It's like a majestic deer. And I think it is part of the deer family, if I'm not mistaken. Second, that they would go and stand in water. And me, who had painted beaches and really enjoys painting water, just thought that was just a kick. And so took a lot of photos. Next year I entered a moose in the water and got in. So I went back again and painted more moose. Got more moose reference. And so I painted moose for a few years for that show, which was great. It was a lot of fun. Haven't painted them since. People ask me why, and by the way, they sold really well, but that's where they sell. In that area, they don't sell in most of the galleries that I'm in. People are not interested where the Rocky Mountain areas, are the areas where moose are more popular. Still fun to paint. This is the first time I painted a moose, I bet in, 20 years.
Bill was asking if you have a certain place where you purchase the rosemary brushes, and we just directly from their website.
Directly.
Sandy just posted, yeah. Rosemary and Company.
Generally, when they come to town, last time they were in town, they contacted us because they knew I had bought a lot of brushes and I recommend them a lot. And so, fortunately, they came to the academy where I teach and did a presentation for the students on not only how brushes are made, but then offered brushes at reasonable discounts for pretty much everybody. And so I stocked up on them.
And then we got more at the conference.
And I bought more. At one of the conferences that I was one of the instructors at the last plein air conference and bought some there. And I'm a brush junkie. And people that know me know that about me, that I buy a lot of paintbrushes. And use them all. So there's my lay-in of the moose. And he's okay. But I don't want to dwell on it. I know I've got everything at least laid in. Is it laid in great? No, but it's laid in. I think one of the things I'm going to do is go back up to the trees, because I was planning on doing that anyway. And I'm going to take care of some of this area.
So a couple more brush questions. Hello wants to know, how long do your brushes last?
Forever. Unless you beat the crap out of them, they last forever. Seriously, I mean that. It's how you take care of them. I was never good at taking care of brushes when I first started painting or when I was illustrating. So I would rip through brushes, and acrylics are harder on brushes than oils. But if you wash them out, and I'm really good at it now. I wash mine out. If Anna's working, I'll wash hers out for her. It's one of the things that I don't mind doing is washing out my brushes. I wash them out with Murphy's oil soap, sometimes shampoo. Doesn't matter, whatever I have. Usually it's Murphy's oil. And then what I do is I use hair conditioner on them. Shape them, let them dry. Oh, that's good. That feels like a sunlit kind of area behind that.
Is that a flat brush you're working with?
Yeah. It's probably about a number 8. That's my guess. Let's see. All the type's gone on it. I think it is a number 8 just looking at it. 8s and 10s I do a lot of work with. Just because it works. Paint's not going down really nice, so I put some more medium into it. Now it's going down really nice. This is the kind of stuff that I could probably spend a couple hours on, just going back and fussing here and there. Bring that light down a little lower there. Okay, that works. Now we're going to take this area and I'm going to put a few tree trunks into it. I'm going to grab my... This is a very inexpensive Egbert brush. An Egbert is a long filbert. Many companies refer to it as a long filbert. When I first learned it, I learned it as an Egbert. And there's trees. There we go. A lot of terp in this, so it lays down. Some of these are fallen logs. Got to give some activity back in here, otherwise it looks very vacant. That's just about the right value that I want too. Probably maybe a little light, but it's pretty close. I want it to sit way back there and just kind of be lost. It's kind of the areas you discover. Now we'll put a little foliage in on that area, and I think I'll go back to where's my big brush? I don't even know. You wouldn't think I could lose that, but okay, ochre and the green. Ochre, maybe some raw sienna in it too. Some medium. It's probably a little too light. It's popping out a little too much. So I added a little bit of blue, a little bit of more raw sienna, and we'll add and if you guys have a chance, I actually added, so I kind of knew where I was going with that. I added some of that stuff in my study. Very crudely, I might add, but that's what studies are. Studies are just basically, is this going to work? You know, it's kind of, as you're approaching a study, you're trying things. I attempt things in studies sometimes, and I'll push things beyond where I would normally push them, even sometimes in a final. Like in this case, I went really super yellow on the sky, and as you notice, I haven't gone quite that yellow. Okay. I'm not worried about do a lot of refinement on the mousse. I know I can pull that off relatively quickly. It's all the build-up of all this stuff to make it believable. There's like a little tree I see kind of right there. I gotta stand back for a second. Okay, values are right. That's what I was checking on, is how these values were shaping up. I'm going to go a little greener now. Right in here. I already have a little bit of a green mixed into that. Interesting.
AJ wants to know, are you thinking about color temperature, warm light versus cool shadows?
Yes.
Oh.
Don't want to lose that because that's my mousse.
Falling.
I didn't have it up there tight enough, obviously.
Got it?
Yeah, but that's probably not going to stay either. Probably need a push pin or something there. Right. Okay. Although I'm not using that right now. And I want some of this foliage to come over that tree. Okay, that's feeling okay. Now if I want to amplify that, I can put a few little darks back right at the base. And they tend to be warmer. Okay. Now. Oh, you got it? Thank you. I'm going to put that there just in case it looks like it's going to fall again. I don't think it will now.
Something else will fall.
Something else will fall? That's true. Boy, I can see all kinds of things. The more I look at this thing, I can see little tree trunks down here coming down. I can see a little warm foliage over here. I can see a couple of little trunks that come from you want to get enough activity going on into these areas so it doesn't feel like underserviced. You know, it feels it has to have enough so it doesn't just feel like you just laid a tone in. That's what you do in a study. In a finish, you go back and you go back and you go back again, and you keep going back until you get it where you want it. That's I think I mentioned last week I think I mentioned making passes, how many passes you make on a painting. And that's kind of what I'm referring to. As you're painting, you're going to make several passes. You're going to do an initial pass, which is what I did right off the bat. Then I'm doing a second pass, a third pass. Now, each time you make a pass, if you're on a finished piece of art, you have more time to sit back and evaluate. Meaning, well, geez, I don't like the color I used. I want to make that a little brighter. I want to make that a little greener. Where on your first lay-in, when you're first laying a piece in, you're approximating where you want the finish to be. So I went a little bluer this time because I see it and I thought I was getting a little sameness in here. I like that. It looks like I could actually bring it right down to the top. Here. Let this kind of work its way over here. It's starting to look okay. It's starting to feel the way I want it to, which is this is all set up now. That's basically what I've done. It's just pretty much set up, just constantly setting it up for the next layer. That's something to keep in mind too, I think. That last comment that I made, I think one thing that you always need to do is every part of your painting is a setup for what's to follow. And finally, when you get to the point when everything feels like you don't need to do anymore, you can call it done. Unless you look at it the next day and realize that you made a mistake. Okay. Let's get a little bit going in the water here, because we're going to put some reflections in there. I just want to see what I got. 35 minutes.
Marcia says, "You go, Norman."
Okay. I just saw something. I kind of like it. I didn't see it before, but I'm going to do it right now. A little passage right in here of, I guess it's more of a mossy kind of a growth. I like that. So it gives me some variations of greens back in here. It's not like it's all the same, which generally drives me crazy if I look at paintings and I see where they've used a green and it's just a over and over the same green. I think that's one of the reasons that it's often said that greens are sometimes some of the hardest colors to paint with. And I really believe that that's because, number one, people paint greens too raw, too bright. And number two, they don't vary the greens. They feel comfortable with a green and they stick with it. Okay. Now, I see a little kind of a reflection from some of this stuff. From this stuff, we see a reflection right in here, right down in the water.
So you're still working from both reference?
Yeah, I'm looking back and forth. Right now I'm looking at this.
Okay. Because I'm right here and I'm trying to figure out what you're working
Well, I'm looking at three things really. I'm really not looking at this. I've already passed this. I'm looking at this for detail. I'm looking at this for kind of the bleach out of the light because I'm going to go a lot. We're going to change this quite a bit. And hopefully I'll leave myself enough time to do that to make it really effective. And then finally I'm looking at my painting because that's really what it's all about anyway. So I'm judging my painting more than I'm judging anything else. And then if it looks like it might use something, then I'll go back and I'll look at the reference. It's interesting because I see some little brighter spots here and there. I'm not sure what that is, but I like it. Okay. Let's start with some of these reflections, and we'll finish up on the moose. The moose is laid in good enough where I could probably put about 5 to 10 minutes into him and maybe make him look complete. I wiped out that part of his face, though. Okay, that's better. So now that's a little too long. Let's work it out. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come right in here, and I'm going to come in with that. And a little.
Sound effects too.
Huh?
Sound effects too.
Yeah. Thinking.
That's pretty thick paint, right?
It's pretty thick. I've added medium so it'll sit on. The reason I added a lot of this solvent-free gel is I'm painting on top of a lot of wet paint, and so I want it to go on without pushing itself into that paint. But I do need to break some darks. Okay, let's move. We're going to go with more of a pretty orange. things I want to do in there is change a little bit of that color right there a little bit. Just checking so we get it approximately in the right spot. I can see I could have gone lighter there. Okay, let's see, I want to get some of this over in here. Right. It's starting to feel right. Actually, you know what though? I did mess up. This needs to come up here. Okay, setting up. Okay, now there's these like almost like lily pads in the water, and I'm going to put a few of those in there. I noticed them earlier. I didn't notice them when I was working last night. I noticed them when I was looking at my reference today, and it's kind of a slightly blue cast to it. So I threw a little ultramarine into the green mixture I had mixed up, just because I thought it would help. And we're going to kind of put them in. That's a little, not quite what I want. It's a little too strong, a little too bright. Let's try this. That feels better. If I felt like it, I'd switch over to a knife right now, but I don't want to take the time. Put one behind the moose.
Mitchell said the moose is loose.
Who said that?
Mitchell Aiken.
Leave it to Mitchell. And now some of them are catching light, it looks like. So I'm going to do a little bit of light on a couple of these, like, right? Not many.
Betsy said she loves the orange in the water.
If I had time, I'd probably do more of it too, truthfully. Those are those judgment calls. That's that evaluation time that I was referring to, that it's really nice when you have that. That's just a luxury.
Polly was saying, it's funny that you're a brush junkie and you're using a gesso brush.
Yeah, it is. You're not the first person to say that, by the way.
Yeah, I don't know why you do that.
It's because it works. I'm a big proponent of do what works. Okay, a couple things. One thing I'm going to do, I just noticed it in another moose photo that I had. And that is they have kind of a beard grow right there. But they also, because they dip their head in the water, I'm afraid I'm blocking you guys, but see if I can do it without.
Cynthia Jackson Hines said you can paint with anything.
Sloppy moose. It reminds me of our dog. Ah, that was crummy. Okay. Now let's go in and do a little bit of work on the moose, and then it gives me a little bit of time to fuss on the trees up in here, because I really wanted to go back into that. And I've got about a little over 20 minutes. So I'm going to put a little bit more modeling in the moose. Right. That's going to be too light, I think. Yep. I'm going to take some. I just mix some Mars Violet into that color. I'm going to add a little bit more sheen. You know, I could probably, in fact, I'm going to try that. I could probably make that cool. Like a cool light, but keep it more in the violet light range. Let's try. I don't know if this is going to work, but I just thought of it. If I don't like it, I'll just wipe it out. I kind of like it. It's cool. Let a little of that cool light hit on him. We could stroke it down a little bit. A little bit on the top of his neck. Right about in here. Hope I'm not blocking too much. I feel like I'm kind of cutting right in front of everybody. I've never tried this color thing. As you notice in my study, I went really warm with it. But I just as I was looking at it, I went, well, that's kind of cool. And there is cooler light. So, but I don't want it blue. Blue's going to make it just too cool. So what I did is I mixed up a little bit of a violet color. And we're going to hit what I call, a lot of this is substructure. And I'll buy that, because at the very end, I'm going to hit a really nice, this is really kind of studying animal anatomy a little bit here. So the head feels like there's so much more detail in it. Boy, I got that leg too skinny. That's a skinny leg. Let's fix that. There we go. The other thing, I did something in my study I kind of like. I brought this leg back a little bit. You see that? And I did that so that I could hit a little bit of a tone, kind of whatever this light color is here, back between. And we're going to go with that same kind of color up. So let's put a little light on the mousse at the end, because we're going to let that skylight that's where he's standing. Okay, let's let a little of this kind of skylight, kind of white and Naples, and I'm going to switch over and use my liner for this, you guys, because this is rim lighting on the mousse. Normally I do this right at the end, but I want to spend time up in here and in here, so I'm going to do it early, and we're going to let a little of that light, this light up in here, come down, and I want to get a little bit more Naples. A lot of terp in this. So that's that light coming in and hitting on. It's going to hit right there. And you got to use the structure, but also use the concept of where the light is coming from. It's coming from behind him and above. Okay. I'll let it come up on this. That's probably a little brighter than I wanted. That is brighter than I wanted. I'll fix it. A little bit as it goes down the nose. Now we got to go back to the mousse color. And trim that down a little bit. That feels better. Also, I still got that put my finger down a lot, so I got to be careful. Every time I should be using, keeps me from putting my finger down if I use this.
Diana wants to know, how do you determine whether to use medium or terp?
Terp thins your paint out a lot more. Medium will allow your paint to be thicker. So if you want a thicker, more bold statement, I use medium. If I want a very delicate area, then I will tend to use more terp. So you can see up in here, it's a little thicker. And that's why I want to give myself a good 10 minutes or so to get back into that area. That's the area that would really take the time in this painting.
Betsy said it seems like you mostly stay away from blue skies.
No, I don't. I thought about that too when I was just starting this thing, that for the last few times. Next week, just because you said that, I'm already thinking about doing kind of an ocean scene because I haven't done one of those yet. So I'll be using a lot more blue. Okay, let's leave this alone for right now. I noticed I did something, I like what I did here better. And if I want to, I can put a little bit of, because reflections can happen anywhere. So if I wanted to, I could pull a couple reflections there, and I'm just kind of playing with okay, I'm going to take as much time as I can and go back up into that sky a little bit. First thing I want to do is bleach out, take white and the yellow with a lot of medium. This could take forever doing what I'm doing now. I won't take forever, but what I want you to see the kind of finish that you need to put into this kind of a thing to really make it work. A lot of it is intent, and I know it's another word I use a lot. How quick and brushy you want the piece to look, or how finished you want the piece to look. That becomes a very personal. That has to do with style and what your goal is in your painting. How's everyone's weather? We had really hot weather this week, and then all of a sudden, today it got cold. So whoever the two individuals were that said wildlife, and the other individual that said do something where your photo isn't the great composition and you can create a better composition. Those were two of the requests from last week, and I appreciate that because it got me thinking. Thinking's good. And I'd be switching off to different types of brushes here, and even up in here I could make that. Let's see if I can do it in the amount of time we have. So trees, if I took the right amount of time, I'd go back into those trees and almost let them get lost into the sky, so you didn't even see them, because it's like the sun is so powerful there that it's just literally completely almost losing the trees. It's starting to work. Key word is starting.
So Jennifer Foster, hi Jennifer.
Hey Jennifer, thank you for sending me all the images of the icebergs floating by in Newfoundland. I really enjoy it. Makes me want to go.
She has a question. When you're reshaping trees with sky color, how do you keep the colors clean? I seem to either ruin my tree or ruin my sky.
It's because I use this medium and I gingerly lay my brush stroke down. I'm not really pressing hard. Yeah, if you press hard, you just mix it right into the paint. That's what probably you're referring to.
And she also said there's lots of moose there too. Newfoundland.
Really?
Yeah.
Gotta make a trip there. So now, I painted a lot of negatives. What I would end up doing is going back and painting more positives now. And the same up in here, like this is really simplified. It's not, there's a lot more going on, and it's just a matter of cutting back into it.
I missed, Christopher had a post earlier about, said he'd like to take an outdoor painting workshop with you sometime.
Well, I got one planned. If everything goes well, hopefully we'll do one in the. I do every year for the last few years. I've done this what I call large scale painting workshop, where I supply the surfaces you guys work on. I actually supply glass palettes for everybody, and we're looking at the end of August in the Squaw Valley, Tahoe area. Hopefully, it'll work out. So you can see how, look at the difference in this and this. And that's just a matter of being able to have the time to go back and fuss. Like I can see up in here, there's a lot of. Okay, I did that on purpose, in case you're wondering. Because you do a little bit of that and then come back with your tree color. If I can match it, I think it's somewhere in here. And that's the difference in painting positives and negatives. You paint a little bit of one, you paint a little bit of the other. You go too far with one, you touch it up, you go the other. But the initial lay-in, you could see, was basically back in here. What do we got? I got almost 10 minutes. And sometimes I've done this where I'll go back the next day and the paint's dry, and even do more. It just depends on how I feel about it. If I look at it, nothing bothers me, I leave it alone. If I look at it and I go, God, it looks too dense there, I need to break that up, then I will literally go back into it and hopefully fix it. And when I was first laying that in, I was trying to be you want to be as accurate as you can be, but at the same time, leave yourself the option of knowing that if you try and be totally accurate, your painting will get so stiff, it will not maintain any freshness. So what you need to do is you need to trust yourself a little bit and put it in there, and then go back and adjust.
Would you talk about the edges in the sky holes?
Yeah. I try not to make them too harsh. If they get too harsh, you do just what I got through saying. You go back and you work the other way. You work the foliage back over the tree hole. If that edge gets too severe, if they start looking like polka dots, let's put it that way. And I'm trying to show enough of the trunk, because I think that's an important characteristic that we see, not just the foliage, but a little bit of that trunk passing through. This can be the most boring part to watch. It's why I don't do a lot of really refining, but I think it's important that everybody knows how far you need to take these things to really get it working, even though it may not be the most like that's really terrible now. Look at that, that's gross. Because it's too the same splotch. So let's carve it down, and then if I have to, I'll put more.
Christopher was asking if this is available on YouTube, and it's on the Academy.
Is this available on YouTube? I have no idea.
Yeah, it's the Academy of Art YouTube.
Oh yeah, that's right. So when I started doing these, I just started doing them on my own, and but because I teach at the Academy, they called me up and said, "Hey, do you mind if we kind of film it and let our?" I said, "Sure, go ahead. It's not. I'm not doing it for anything else other than kind of showing people different approaches to painting different subjects." And so that's what happened. It was kind of fun. Let's put a little. I'm gonna put a little piece of water over in here, maybe.
Piece of water.
It kind of sneaks in there. Just leave it alone. That's what I said, piece of water. It just reminds me, a friend of Anna and mine who's just marvelous, just fabulous painter, Sherry McGraw. And we've gotten to know her pretty well over the years. And she was doing a demonstration one time. I loved this. I told her afterwards, I said, I love this comment. She says, so I'm going to lay a piece of paint down. And what it meant is there was body to the paint. It wasn't just pushing a tone into something. There was actually body and structure in the paint, which I just thought was a great way of stating that rather than saying I'm going to put a stroke down, I'm going to put a piece of paint down. That helped a little bit too. It kept it from being too flat. Now I like kind of what's starting to happen up in here where that tree is starting to almost fade into the sky because of the bright sun. I might even do that here a little bit more and even bring a little bit of that. This is where you can dance your paint back and forth and kind of decide, make it a little brighter here. And if it doesn't work, I'll paint over it. You sure remember, I don't coin a lot of phrases, but the one phrase that I coined that I actually like quite a bit is, it's only wrong if you leave it. Meaning that take some chances. If it doesn't work, fix it, paint it. If you leave it and it's wrong, then that's on you. But sometimes you can't tell whether something's right or wrong immediately, not till the next day. The only thing that I can think of that really helps with that aspect is plein air painting, painting on location. Simply because you literally have to get it done in the allotted amount of time. And because of that, it's just fabulous training ground for making decisions. And I think it's through that I came up with that whole quick studies concept, is because even with models, if you put the model up there for 25 minutes, you say, okay, and the model walks away, whether you're done or not, you're done.
Excuse me, Kevin said that he's coming away from today's lesson with the importance of varying brush pressure.
Yeah, yes. Absolutely. I'm glad you're getting that, because it's brush pressure, but it's not just pressure, it's how wet your paint is on your brush. If your paint is really wet, you're going to get a different kind of character. That dark stroke is a screw up. You're going to get a different kind of a character than if your paint is really dry. If it's really wet, like the thicker you get it, if you're painting into, there's three things to consider. There's more than three. I just realized this. The load of paint on your brush is one. How much paint do you have on your brush? Is it, that's one. Secondly, how wet is the paint that's on your brush? And that determination should be made based on what you're painting into. So if you're painting into something that is very, very wet, you cannot let your paint be dry, because all it's going to do is it's just going to smear right into that color. So you have all those characteristics. Then you have the facet of the brush. Am I going to use that part of the brush, that part of the brush, the corner of the brush, the tip of the brush? Am I going to rub all what that? If you actually take that and you combine that with the concept of pressure, how much pressure am I putting on? That's what gives you your variations. All those things combined, not one, all of them. So it's pressure, load of paint, wetness of paint that you're painting into, and facet of the brush that you're using. Well, this is almost done because we're about the time frame. I try and keep it at an hour and a half because generally it gets tedious after this, and it's easy for people to get very, very bored with it. So I hope what you guys got out of it is a lesson on combining references and keeping a color concept in mind. I did that a little bit last week with the color concept in mind, but in this case you can see it's quite a bit different than all of the images I'm painting. I can see that I could easily go back and add some other tones, a little more information back in those areas. But overall, it kind of came off the way I wanted, similar to this. The one thing that I do like better in this is the composition. I think the composition's improved from this. I also like the fact that I use the cool in here instead of keeping everything so warm. I think I learned something in that. So hopefully you guys did too. And I think next week I'm going to try some sort of ocean scene because I haven't done that yet with something here off the Sonoma coast because I painted out there several times and I know I have some images from there. So I won't hit you with this, but enjoy the time you have at paint and stay healthy and enjoy the outside if the weather gets good. If you do, wear a mask. Okay? Only if you're around other people. We do. We wear a mask when we get around other people, but when it's just us and the dog walking, we're fine. And I don't wear a mask when I paint. Enjoy. Thank you.